The silence of the hospital hallway shattered when a baby's cry echoed through the sterile air, a sound foreign to Daniel, who had never imagined such a voice calling him to account. His chest tightened as the cry pierced deeper, louder, dragging memories of nights he had drowned in bottles rather than responsibility. A nurse with trembling hands stepped forward, whispering, "Daniel, she has your eyes." The name ripped through his soul like a verdict, undeniable, unprepared, merciless. He stumbled, shaking his head, saying, "No, you've made a mistake, that cannot be mine." The words cracked under the weight of disbelief, yet the truth pressed against him with every fragile sob. The courtroom in his mind collapsed into the white hospital walls, voices overlapping, the judge declaring, "The DNA confirms paternity." Daniel's breath caught as if someone had stolen it from his lungs. He pressed his fists into his temples, muttering, "Not me, not now, not ever." But the baby's cry didn't yield. It sliced through excuses, through denial, through the fragile armor of detachment he had worn for years. Every second felt stretched into eternity, his world unraveling at the sound of innocence demanding to be heard. He turned his face away, yet the nurse moved closer, and with trembling resolve whispered, "Her eyes are searching for you." Daniel gasped, the final defense shattering, his heart betraying him with a thundering ache. Daniel staggered backward, his heart pounding as if each beat declared his guilt louder than words could. He whispered, "No, I don't belong here." Yet the sterile air pressed against him, suffocating denial. The baby's cry echoed again, stabbing through his ears, dragging him closer to the truth. He tried to recall nights spent in the haze of bars, laughter that masked emptiness, promises he never kept. Every memory struck him with the weight of a man who had walked away too often. The nurse's gaze lingered on him like judgment carved into stone. She said, "You can't escape blood." The words struck him harder than any courtroom sentence. He clenched his fists, muttering, "This isn't my life, it can't be." But in his chest, a war began, duty against freedom, love against fear, survival against surrender. The child's innocence stripped him bare, exposing scars he had buried for years. His voice cracked, "I can't." But the baby's cry answered, unrelenting, demanding, merciless. The hallway stretched like a tunnel. Each step Daniel took heavier, dragging him toward the crib he longed to avoid. He muttered, "Every mistake has a face now." His throat burned as memories clawed back, his father's harsh words echoing, "You'll never be a man." He had sworn never to repeat that cycle, yet here it was, screaming before him. The nurse's hand trembled as she reached toward him, saying softly, "She deserves more than silence." Daniel clenched his jaw, his voice low, "I don't know how." The baby's small hand twitched from the blanket, and his chest fractured, a storm raging within him. He whispered, "What if I ruin her too?" The nurse's eyes welled, yet her words cut firm, "She's already waiting for you." The walls seemed to close tighter, the sound of his heart colliding with the baby's cry, until denial had no place to hide. Daniel pressed his palm to the wall, grounding himself against the quake inside his chest. He murmured, "I don't have enough left in me." The nurse's gaze softened, yet her voice was unyielding. "She doesn't need perfect, she needs present." His lips trembled as he whispered, "I'm already broken." The baby's cry rose again, piercing, unrelenting, as if the universe itself demanded his answer. His mind raced with the nights he had abandoned love, jobs, and promises. He knew running was easier, but now the weight was heavier. He whispered with trembling breath, "Why me?" The nurse stepped closer, her shadow falling across him, saying firmly, "Because no one else will." His knees weakened, and his world spun with the cruel irony that the child he never wanted might be the only thing left to save him. The cry softened for a moment, not silence but a fragile pause, as if the child's voice had surrendered only to wait for him. Daniel closed his eyes, chest rising heavy, whispering, "I don't know how to be what she needs." The nurse's reply came steady, unwavering, "You learn, or you lose her." The words echoed like prophecy. He remembered the faces of women he left behind, the friendships burned, the trust broken. He saw in the child the mirror of every wrong choice reflected back. A tremor shook him as he forced his eyes open, staring at the crib where innocence waited. The cry began again, softer but insistent. And for the first time Daniel didn't turn away. His throat thickened, his eyes burning, as he whispered a broken line into the cold air. "She has my eyes." And the weight of that truth dragged him into the storm he could no longer escape. Daniel sat in the hospital chair, his body heavy with exhaustion that came not from work but from decades of running. He whispered, "I was never meant for this." The baby's soft breathing filled the silence, every inhale pricking his heart like thorns. His mind returned to the nights when he was 12, lying awake, listening to his father rage in the next room. He muttered, "I swore I'd never repeat him." Yet the weight of abandonment circled him like a ghost refusing to let go. The nurse placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle, saying, "Cycles only end when someone stands still." He clenched his jaw, eyes darting toward the crib. His lips trembled. What if I destroy her before I begin? He thought of lovers he'd left without warning, promises broken before sunrise, friendships burned for pride. The nurse's gaze pressed deeper, her silence louder than words, her patience dragging him closer to a truth he couldn't bear. The child shifted, and Daniel felt his breath shatter. "She deserves more than me," he whispered. Yet the universe seemed to whisper back, "She deserves you." The nurse drew closer, her eyes weary but steady, as though she had carried burdens heavier than Daniel could imagine. She said, "She doesn't need a savior. She needs a father." The word father clanged like iron in Daniel's chest, burning against every denial he carried. He muttered, "I don't know how to hold anything that doesn't fall apart." Memories of his own mother's absence seared through him, a wound he never dared touch until now. He recalled her silence, her leaving, the endless waiting for someone who never returned. The child's tiny hand twitched against the blanket, and Daniel's heart cracked under the weight of what that absence meant. His voice fractured. "What if I walk away too?" The nurse's reply was sharp, yet laced with compassion. "Then she will know what it is to grow with emptiness." He pressed his palms together, sweat gathering, his body trembling as though the floor had disappeared beneath him. The baby stirred, and in her fragile restlessness, Daniel saw the echo of his own childhood ache, an ache he swore no one else should endure. Daniel rose unsteadily, pacing across the hospital floor, the echo of his boots thudding like judgment in the sterile silence. He muttered, "I've only ever known how to leave." His voice cracked under the weight of truth. He remembered nights when he abandoned jobs, running before accountability found him. His chest tightened at the memory of promises whispered, then shattered before morning. He turned sharply, eyes locked on the crib, breath uneven. "I don't know how to stay," he whispered. The nurse watched him, lips pressed into a line of quiet endurance, her silence answering louder than scolding. The baby's breath rasped softly, fragile yet commanding. Daniel's knees buckled as he crouched low, his face level with the crib. His whisper broke into confession, "Teach me how." But the only response was the steady rhythm of a child too young to know. She was already teaching him what no one else could. The nurse finally spoke, her voice low. "The lesson begins when you stop walking away." Daniel sat again, head in his hands, the smell of antiseptic and old grief filling his lungs. He muttered, "Every step feels like quicksand." His heart pounded as memories surged, his father's voice spitting venom, "You're worthless." He had lived a lifetime trying to outrun those words, but here, in this sterile room, they bled into the present. The nurse leaned against the wall, her voice steady. "She doesn't see your past. She only sees your eyes." He lifted his head, tears carving paths down his face, whispering, "But those eyes have seen too much ruin." The baby shifted in her crib, her small chest rising, a fragile sound of life echoing in the stillness. Daniel reached toward her without touching, his hand trembling inches away. "I can't promise I won't fail," he said. The nurse's gaze narrowed, You only promised to try. His breath shook, his body folding with the weight of surrender. He whispered, "Trying might break me." Yet the child's tiny exhale carried more hope than his fear. The silence thickened, broken only by the baby's fragile breaths. Daniel rose slowly, as if each movement risked shattering him further. He whispered, "I've never finished anything I started." His eyes lingered on the crib, a prison and a promise in one. The nurse's tones softened, but her words cut true. "Then begin here, and don't end." His lips trembled as he murmured, "She will hate me one day for all I failed to give." He imagined years unfolding, the child asking questions he could not answer, demanding truths he didn't know how to hold. His chest ached with a lifetime of absence, yet his feet refused to step away this time. He exhaled, whispering like a vow, "If I ruin her, I ruin myself too." The nurse's gaze carried the weight of faith he could not feel. The baby stirred, and her faint cry cracked the silence. Daniel's eyes burned as he finally said the words aloud, "She has my eyes, and she has my fight." Daniel walked into his mother's old living room, the air thick with judgment before words even left her lips. She sat upright, eyes sharp, voice cold. "You can't raise that child." His chest tightened, the rejection cutting deeper than he expected. He muttered, "She's mine, whether I asked for her or not." His mother scoffed, "Blood isn't enough when you're already broken." The baby's cry echoed from the carrier at his side, fragile yet louder than any argument. Daniel clenched his jaw, whispering, "I won't leave her like I was left." His mother's lips curled in disdain. "You'll repeat the same ruin you came from." His fists trembled, his breath unsteady, but his voice grew steadier. "Then I'll break what broke me." The words shook the room, his mother's silence suddenly heavier than her scorn. Daniel bent to adjust the baby's blanket, whispering, "She deserves to know someone fought for her." For the first time, his mother looked away, unwilling to face the reflection of her own choices in his vow. Daniel's sister stormed into the room, eyes blazing with fury, voice sharp as glass. "You can't even care for yourself. And now you want to care for her?" Daniel staggered under the weight of her scorn, muttering, "I didn't choose this, but she chose me." His sister pointed a shaking finger. "You'll fail her like you failed us." The baby stirred, whimpering softly, and Daniel's hands trembled as he adjusted her blanket. He whispered, "I won't abandon her." His sister's words cut deeper. "Your promises are ash before morning." Daniel's voice cracked, but his tone hardened. "This isn't about me anymore." His sister scoffed, tears burning her eyes. "It's always been about you." Silence hung heavy, broken only by the child's tiny cry. Daniel stared at his sister, whispering, "Then, let it be about her." The words rang louder than any argument, shifting the room with a truth no one could deny. Later, Daniel sat alone on the edge of his childhood bed, the walls lined with peeling paint, suffocating him with memories. He whispered, "Every ghost in this house wants me to fail." The baby stirred in the carrier at his feet, her tiny whimper a reminder of the living weight before him. He remembered nights he fled this room to escape his father's wrath, only to return broken again. He pressed his forehead to his palms, muttering, "I'm still running inside these walls." The floor creaked as his mother appeared at the doorway, her voice low, "You'll never be enough." He lifted his head, eyes red, replying, "I don't need to be enough. I just need to stay." The baby's cry swelled louder, filling the room with a demand stronger than his mother's judgment. His voice rose above it, "She won't grow up in silence." The echo of defiance felt like the first brick laid in a wall against generations of ruin. The following day, Daniel faced his friend Mark in a small diner, the smell of grease and coffee clinging to the air. Mark leaned across the table, voice laced with disbelief. "Man, you can't do this. You're not built for fatherhood." Daniel gritted his teeth, whispering, "She's already mine." Mark shook his head, smirking bitterly, "You'll ruin her before you even try." Daniel's fists clenched on the table, trembling with restraint. "I'd rather try and fail than walk away again." Mark laughed harshly, This isn't about pride. It's about survival, and you can't even survive yourself. Daniel leaned closer, voice sharp. Then I'll learn survival for her. The baby slept beside him in the carrier, her presence louder than the diner's chatter. Mark's laughter faltered as Daniel's eyes burned with conviction. For the first time, Daniel's words didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like a vow no one could tear from him. Daniel walked through the neighborhood streets, whispers following him like shadows. A neighbor muttered loudly, "Poor child, one last with him." Another added, "Hell run like always." Daniel's hands shook as he pushed the stroller, muttering, "They don't know me anymore." His chest ached with every step, the weight of eyes burning his back. The baby stirred, her small cry silencing gossip for a moment. He whispered to her, "They can doubt me, but you won't." His voice hardened, louder than he meant. "I'll show them I can stay." An older man on the corner spat, "Your kind never changes." Daniel stopped, jaw clenched, whispering to the baby, "Then let's change anyway." The stroller wheels rattled on cracked pavement, his footsteps echoing with resolve. The voices behind him faded, but his vow lingered in the night air, heavier than all their judgment. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his hands trembling against the wood, when his sister Emily leaned in, her voice low but sharp. "You were never supposed to know the truth." His heart lurched, confusion tearing through his chest. He muttered, "What truth?" Emily's eyes brimmed with tears, yet her tone hardened. "The baby isn't yours." The words echoed like a gunshot, collapsing the fragile hope he had clung to. He whispered, "What do you mean?" Emily pressed her palms flat on the table, her voice cracking. "She's mine. I couldn't raise her, so I let them test you." Daniel's body shook, rage colliding with disbelief. He slammed his fist against the table, muttering, "You lied to me. You let me drown thinking she was mine." Emily sobbed. It was the only way to protect her. Daniel's eyes burned, his voice torn between grief and fury. "You stole my choice and you broke me with it." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream, the baby's soft cry slicing through the room like truth demanding to be faced. Daniel's voice cracked as he rose, pacing furiously. "You let me carry a lie. You watched me bleed for her." Emily's sobs broke into stammering words. "I thought I could protect her by hiding." He turned sharply, eyes burning. "Protect her from who?" "Me." His mother entered from the hallway, her tone flat as stone. "Protect her from yourself." Daniel froze, his breath shallow, the betrayal multiplying before him. He whispered, "You all knew." His mother nodded grimly. Better one broken heart than two ruined lives. Rage surged, and Daniel shouted, "You decided my life without asking me." The baby whimpered from the carrier, her tiny voice trembling through the storm of secrets. Emily pressed her hands to her face, sobbing, "I wasn't strong enough." Daniel clenched his fists, his voice cutting like glass. "So you made me carry your strength." His chest heaved as he realized the weight of every word spoken. The truth left no room for repair, only devastation. Daniel leaned over the carrier, his voice trembling, "And she's mine still, no matter your secrets." Emily stepped closer, her tears blurring. "You don't have to carry this anymore." He turned to her, fury crackling in every word. "You don't get to give and take away a child like a burden passed." His mother's voice cut coldly, "You were never ready." Daniel's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, his body trembling as though every muscle fought collapse. He whispered, "I may not have been ready, but I was willing." Emily's sobs filled the silence, her voice thin. "I was scared." Daniel clenched the edge of the crib, his knuckles white. Fear doesn't excuse betrayal. The baby stirred again, her innocence louder than every word, and Daniel whispered fiercely, "She looked at me like I was hers. That's enough for me." The room fell silent, the truth leaving them broken in its aftermath. Daniel stormed out into the night, his boots striking pavement as if to silence the voices still ringing in his head. His breath turned sharp in the cold air, muttering, "Lies, every one of them." The baby's cry carried from the carrier strapped against his chest, her fragile sound anchoring him against collapse. He whispered, "They can't take you from me." His vision blurred with tears, anger coursing with grief in his veins. Emily's voice chased him in memory. "She's mine." He pressed his hand protectively over the carrier, whispering, "She's ours now." Streetlights flickered above him, throwing shadows that stretched long across cracked pavement. His chest throbbed as though every step dragged him deeper into the war of truth and love. He clenched his jaw, voice sharp. "I won't let them erase what I already became." The baby's breath softened, as though she trusted his vow more than he trusted himself. For the first time, resolve surged higher than fear. Daniel returned to the hospital, the sterile walls swallowing his footsteps as he stormed through the corridor. He muttered, "If the truth kills me, let it." The nurse turned, eyes wide, asking softly, "What happened?" His voice broke as he snapped, "They lied. They all lied." The nurse's gaze softened, yet her tone remained firm. "And still you stayed." His knees buckled as he leaned against the wall, pressing the carrier closer, whispering, "She's the only truth I have left." The baby stirred, her tiny cry echoing through the empty corridor like a heartbeat made of sound. He closed his eyes, voice trembling. "If she's not mine by blood, she's mine by choice." The nurse placed a steadying hand on his arm, whispering, "Then that choice is stronger than any test." Daniel's chest heaved as he bent low, whispering into the carrier, "I will not walk away. Not now, not ever." His words cracked, yet carried the weight of defiance and love. The courtroom was suffocating. Daniel stood at the witness stand, his face pale, his hands gripping the edge for support. The judge's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Daniels, do you admit to being the father of the child?" His heart thundered in his chest, every breath a fight to hold back the truth. Daniel's gaze flicked toward his mother, seated in the front row, her eyes filled with judgment, guilt, and disbelief. His mouth went dry, the weight of the question threatening to crush him. He whispered, "I admit it." A collective gasp filled the room, the words hanging in the air like a verdict. His mother's eyes widened, her disbelief palpable. He swallowed hard, his voice gaining strength. "She's my daughter, and I'll fight for her." His voice broke as he turned to the opposing counsel, the room falling silent under his words. "I won't be the man I was. I won't walk away again." The judge slammed the gavel, and the room trembled with the finality of the moment. He had chosen, and there was no going back. The air in the courtroom grew heavier as Daniel took a step forward, his voice gaining power. "I may not have been ready," he said, his gaze unwavering, "but I am here now." His words were firm, each syllable cutting through the silence. His heart raced, but he could feel the weight of his daughter's gaze even from across the room. The judge nodded, but it was the look from his mother that shook him. She didn't speak, but her expression was enough. Daniel clenched his fists, holding back the tears that threatened to break free. "This is no longer about what was," he continued, voice breaking. "It's about what is and what will be." The tension in the courtroom was palpable, the silence broken only by the baby's soft cry in the background. Daniel's words rang through the room, an unyielding promise to his daughter and to himself. The doors to the courtroom opened, and the room fell into stunned silence. A figure stepped inside, tall and confident, her face familiar yet unfamiliar all at once. It was Emily. Her eyes met Daniel's, filled with sorrow and something darker, guilt. She stepped forward, her voice quiet but cutting. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought I was protecting you." Daniel froze, his heart seizing. "Protecting me?" he whispered, disbelief turning to rage. "You never gave me a choice. You stole that from me." Emily's face crumpled, and she reached for him, but Daniel took a step back, shaking his head. "I'm done with your lies." The silence in the room was suffocating, the weight of the years they'd spent in a web of deceit pressing down on them all. Daniel turned to face the judge again, his voice a low growl. "I will not be her mistake. I will fight for her, for me." The judge's voice broke through the chaos. "This court will adjourn until a decision is made." Daniel stood frozen, the air thick with the weight of his choices. As he walked toward the exit, his mother's voice called after him, "You're not the man I raised, Daniel." He stopped, turning slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. "No," he replied, his voice unwavering. "I'm the man I chose to be." His mother's eyes softened, her lips trembling as she whispered, "You won't be able to undo this." Daniel's expression hardened, his heart steeled against her words. "I don't need to undo it," he said, his voice firm. "I just need to move forward." With that, he turned and walked out, his steps echoing in the hallway, the weight of his resolve carrying him forward, no longer burdened by the past. Daniel stood in the empty hallway outside the courtroom, the weight of the battle heavy on his chest. He pulled the baby closer, her small, fragile form resting in the carrier. "I won't fail you," he whispered, his voice filled with quiet defiance. The baby's soft cry pierced the silence, a reminder of the truth that had changed everything. His hands shook as he adjusted her blanket, his resolve hardening. "I will be the father you deserve," he vowed, his voice steady. "I will be the man who stays." The hallway felt endless, yet for the first time, Daniel knew his path was clear. The fight wasn't over, but it had already begun, and he would not turn back. His heart, once shattered, now beat with purpose. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fridge and the distant sounds of traffic. Daniel stood by the window, watching the world outside move without him. His daughter slept peacefully in the crib behind him, a small, fragile reminder of everything he'd fought for. He hadn't been the man his mother wanted, or the man society expected. But in this room, with his daughter, he could feel the weight of redemption lifting. His past would never be erased, the mistakes never forgotten, but he could choose how to move forward. "I'm here," he whispered to her, "and that's all I can promise." He knew that no matter what the future held, this was the moment that defined him, not the man he'd been, but the man he was becoming. He turned from the window, gazing down at the small life he was now responsible for. He wasn't perfect, but he would try. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't ready for this, he wasn't sure he'd ever be ready. He walked slowly to the door, bracing himself. When he opened it, his mother stood there, her eyes red from crying, her face drawn with regret. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded, stepping aside. She entered, her gaze flickering to the baby sleeping in the crib. "Oh." There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought you'd make it. I was wrong." Daniel met her eyes, his own softening. "I don't need you to say that," he replied quietly. "But I'm here. I'm not leaving her." His mother's lips trembled, and she nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. The walls between them hadn't fully crumbled, but for the first time, the cracks seemed to show signs of healing. The following days were quiet, a strange peace settling over the apartment. Daniel spent hours with the baby, learning the rhythms of her life, the soft cooing sounds, the tiny hands grasping at nothing, the trust that came so easily to someone so young. The weight of responsibility still pressed on him, but it was different now. He wasn't alone. His past might have been filled with mistakes, but the future held something worth fighting for. "I'm learning," he whispered to her one evening as he rocked her to sleep. "I'm learning how to be your father." As the night deepened, he sat by the crib, watching her breath rise and fall with the rhythm of innocence. He didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Not just for himself, but for her too. It wasn't an easy road. There were still moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if he was enough. But in the quiet moments like tonight, when the baby's tiny hand grasped his finger, Daniel knew something had changed. He wasn't running anymore. For the first time, he was standing still. The past had taught him pain and loss, but it had also taught him how to fight. And fight he would. "I won't fail you," he whispered to her, his voice filled with the quiet strength of a man who had been broken but not defeated. "I'll be the father you deserve." The baby stirred slightly, her tiny eyes opening for a moment before closing again. Daniel smiled softly, watching her, knowing that as long as he had breath in his body, he would fight for her every day, without question. The sun rose the next morning, casting a new light over the apartment. Daniel stood by the window, holding the baby in his arms. The world outside seemed just as it always had, but Daniel knew he was different now. His eyes flicked down to the baby, her tiny fingers curled around his thumb. "You're my world now," he whispered to her, "and I'll never let go." For the first time, he felt the weight of his choices settle on his shoulders, not as a burden but as a responsibility he was ready to carry. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't have all the solutions. But for the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to fight for something that mattered. "This is where I belong," he said softly, the promise clear in his voice. With one last look at the world outside, he turned back to the crib, knowing that his fight and his love would guide him through whatever came next. Daniel sat by the window, the city outside moving in its usual chaos, but inside everything felt still. He watched the sun set, its fading light casting long shadows across the room. The baby, now more than a year old, slept peacefully in her crib, the soft rise and fall of her chest, a constant reminder of the battle he had fought and won. He ran his fingers through his hair, exhausted yet content. "I never wanted to be a father," he whispered, "but now I can't imagine being anything else." His voice cracked as the truth settled in. He had come so far from running away to standing still, from fear to fierce love. It wasn't perfect. The road had been full of mistakes, regrets, and betrayals. But as he looked at the child who had changed everything, he knew it had all been worth it. She was his, and that was all that mattered now. "I'm your father," he whispered again, the words finally tasting like truth. The sound of the front door opening brought Daniel out of his thoughts. He turned to see his mother standing in the doorway, hesitant, her face drawn with age and regret. She had come, but not for forgiveness, not for a reunion, but because she needed to see the man he had become. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Daniel stood, his chest tight. He didn't know how to answer her. The years of estrangement, the judgment, the pain, it had all led to this moment. "You don't have to say that," he replied softly. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." His mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the baby in the crib, her guilt heavy in the air. "You've done something I never could," she whispered. And for the first time, Daniel saw her not as the woman who abandoned him, but as a mother, broken and searching for redemption too. "I hope she grows up knowing the man you've become," she said before quietly leaving him to wonder if the healing could begin. Even now, Daniel sat alone that night, the quiet of the apartment overwhelming. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the pain, the struggle, it all seemed so far away now. The world outside hadn't changed, but he had. His daughter had taught him things he never thought he would learn. And he had taught her things too. "I don't have the answers," he murmured to her sleeping form, "but I'll always try." The darkness outside the window seemed to hold the answer. The past was behind him, and the future, uncertain as it was, lay ahead. He wasn't sure where it would take him, but he would walk it with her, every step of the way. "You're my daughter," he whispered softly, his voice cracking, "and I'm your father, and that's enough." For the first time, the weight of his own imperfections felt like freedom. He wasn't looking for redemption anymore. He had found it in the only place that mattered, within himself. The next morning, the world felt different. Daniel woke to the sound of his daughter's laughter, a sound that filled the room with life. He rose from the bed, stretching, and went to the crib where she was already awake, her tiny hands reaching for him. "You're up early, huh?" he whispered, his voice thick with sleep. She giggled in response, her eyes bright and full of trust. He lifted her into his arms, smiling despite the exhaustion that still tugged at him. "I'm here," he said softly, "and I always will be." For a moment, everything felt right. The struggles, the pain, the doubts, they had all led him here. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the future. The love he had for her was enough to carry him forward. No more running. No more turning away. He was here, and that was enough. The years would pass, and life would continue. But Daniel knew that no matter what came next, he would be ready. He had learned the hard way, through pain and loss, what it meant to love. And now, as he watched his daughter grow, he knew there was nothing he wouldn't do for her. "I never wanted to be a father," he whispered to her one night as he tucked her into bed. "But I'm glad I am." The words felt final, like a promise fulfilled. As he turned off the light, he lingered for a moment in the doorway, watching her sleep peacefully. The world outside was still chaotic, but in this small corner of it, there was peace. He had found it, not by escaping the past, but by embracing the future. And as he closed the door softly behind him, he knew the journey had only just begun. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready,